The warning lights painted the bridge of the Harmonious Discovery in angry shades of red and orange. Captain Velnar's crystalline body pulsed with stress patterns as another alarm joined the chorus of disaster. The asteroid had come from nowhere, tearing through their starboard hull like it was made of paper instead of reinforced duralloy. Life support failing in sections 7 through 12, reported Engineer Thisik, his chitinous fingers dancing across controls that sparked and flickered. We've lost the main reactor. Backup power at 40% and dropping. Velnar felt his internal structure vibrate with what humans would call fear. In his 300 years of service to the Galactic Coalition, he had never faced a crisis like this. His species, the Velskari, came from a world of perfect stability, controlled weather, abundant resources, and natural harmony. They had never needed to develop instincts for sudden disaster. Send the distress signal, Velnar ordered. Maximum range. All frequencies. Communications Officer Numa, a being of sentient gas contained in a specialized suit, worked her console with evident distress. Her voice came through her speaker with a trembling quality. Signal broadcasting, Captain. But the nearest Coalition vessel is the Tranquil Wanderer. They're 3 weeks away at maximum speed. 3 weeks. They had perhaps 3 days of life support remaining. Less if the hull breaches worsened. The bridge fell silent except for the alarms. The crew of 47 souls represented 12 different species, all from worlds the Coalition classified as stable and safe. None of them had evolved to handle crisis. Their civilizations had developed in environments of plenty and peace, which made them excellent scientists, philosophers, and artists. It did not make them survivors, Captain, Thisik said quietly. I'm receiving a response to our distress call. Velnar's body brightened with hope. The Tranquil Wanderer found a faster route. No, sir. The signal is coming from the mining vessel Perseverance. They're 43 minutes away and diverting to our position. Something in Thisik's tone made Velnar's crystalline structure dim with new concern. What's wrong? Why do you sound afraid? Thisik's antennae drooped. Captain, I looked up their registration. The Perseverance is crewed by humans. The word sent a ripple of reaction through the bridge crew. Humans. The newcomers from the rim world called Earth. The species from the planet. So dangerous that when the Coalition's survey team had first cataloged it, 3 separate xenobiologists had insisted the classification must be an error. Velnar accessed the database entry for Earth with growing horror. Class 12 Deathworld. The highest rating possible. He read through the environmental assessment with disbelief that anything could evolve in such conditions, let alone achieve spaceflight. Earth's atmosphere contained oxygen at concentrations that would be toxic to most Coalition species. The planet experienced regular seismic events, massive storms, temperature variations that ranged from freezing to boiling, and radiation from its star that caused cellular damage. The surface was covered with organisms that survived by consuming other organisms. Predation was not just common but the foundation of the entire ecosystem. The report included images of Earth's native life. Velnar stared at a creature called a crocodile and felt his structure crack slightly from stress. Another image showed a grizzly bear. A third showed something called a box jellyfish that could kill most known species with a single touch. And humans had evolved alongside these horrors. Had learned to survive despite them. Had somehow built a civilization in the midst of constant environmental warfare. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the human vessel, Numa announced. Put it through, Velnar said, trying to keep his voice steady. The voice that came through the speakers was strange, rough in a way that Coalition voices rarely were, with odd tonal variations. But it sounded almost cheerful. This is Commander Sarah Chen of the mining vessel Perseverance. We've received your distress call and are proceeding to your location. ETA 40 minutes. Hang tight, Harmonious Discovery. We're coming to get you. Velnar managed to respond. Commander Chen, we appreciate your response. However, I must warn you that our ship has suffered catastrophic damage. We have multiple hull breaches, radiation leaks from the damaged reactor, and sections exposed to hard vacuum. The environment aboard our vessel is extremely dangerous. There was a pause, then a sound that Velnar's translator interpreted as laughter. Laughter, in response to being told about lethal conditions. Yeah, we got the readings on our scanners, Commander Chen replied. Looks pretty rough. We'll suit up appropriately. See you soon, Captain. Perseverance out. The connection closed, leaving the bridge crew in stunned silence. "They're still coming," Thisik whispered. "I told them about the radiation levels in the breach sections. Those levels would kill any of us in minutes." And they laughed. Velnar accessed more information about humans, his dread growing with each entry. Humans had something called an immune system, because their world was so filled with microscopic organisms that could cause disease. They had evolved dense skeletal structures and powerful muscles to handle their world's crushing gravity. Gravity that would leave most coalition species unable to stand. They could survive for extended periods without food or water, because their evolution had prepared them for scarcity. Most disturbing was a note in the file about human psychology. Humans, the report stated, had developed advanced stress response systems. Where most coalition species would freeze or shut down when faced with sudden danger, humans experienced something called an adrenaline response that actually made them faster and stronger. They had evolved to function better in crisis situations. What kind of world created beings like that? Thisik pulled up a visual feed from their external cameras as the human ship approached. The Perseverance was not elegant like coalition vessels. It was blocky and functional, covered in heavy plating and industrial equipment. Velnar realized with shock that what he had assumed were defensive weapons were actually mining tools. The humans hadn't even needed to modify their ship to respond to a crisis. They simply flew around in vessels that could tear apart asteroids. As part of their regular work, the human ship matched velocity, with a harmonious discovery with surprising precision. Through the view screen, Velnar could see an airlock extending toward one of their intact docking ports. "They're boarding through the main airlock," Numa reported. "That's on the opposite side of the ship from the damaged sections. At least they're being cautious." But Velnar accessed the internal sensors and felt his structure nearly shatter from shock. "No, look at camera feeds from Section 9. They're not using the main airlock." On the screen, suited figures moved through the jagged tear in the hull, the same breach that had been exposed to vacuum and stellar radiation for the past 3 hours. The same breach that registered as instant death for any coalition species. The humans moved through it like they were taking a casual walk. The figures were large, humans, apparently matched the physical profile of species from heavy gravity worlds. Their suits were less bulky than coalition emergency gear, as if they didn't need as much protection. As Velnar watched, one of the humans paused to examine a piece of torn hull plating, then casually tossed it aside. The metal chunk weighed at least 50 kilograms. "Captain," one of the humans' voices came over the comm system. "Commander Chen here. We're inside your ship. We're seeing a lot of radiation in this area. What are the safety limits for your species?" Velnar checked the readings from Section 9, where the humans were standing. "Commander, the radiation in your current location is at lethal levels. You need to evacuate immediately." Another pause. Then, "Could you give me that in numbers?" "Our suits are reading about 40 millisieverts per hour." Velnar converted the measurement. "Yes, that's correct. That level of exposure will cause fatal cellular damage." "Huh," Commander Chen said thoughtfully. "Yeah, okay. That's pretty hot. We can work in this for about 6 hours before it becomes a real problem. Should be plenty of time to patch your reactor and stabilize your life support. Where do you need us?" 6 hours. They could work in lethal radiation for 6 hours and considered it merely uncomfortable. Velnar gave them directions to the reactor with shaking commands, then turned to his bridge crew. Their various expressions of shock and fear reflected his own feelings. They had called for rescue from the only species close enough to reach them in time. They had been saved by beings from a world so terrible that it had forged them into something that barely registered danger the way normal species did. "Thisik," Velnar said quietly. "Begin preparing the crew for possible evacuation to the human vessel." "Sir," the engineer replied, his voice hollow. "I'm not sure our species can survive on a human ship." "We'll have to try," Velnar said, watching the feeds as humans moved through his dying ship, working in environments that should kill them, treating a desperate crisis with calm efficiency. "We'll have to hope that beings from a Deathworld remember what mercy is." Through the cameras, he watched a human stop to help a trapped Chitrish crew member, gently lifting debris that must have weighed more than the human herself. She spoke softly to the terrified engineer, her tone gentle despite the rough quality of her voice. Perhaps, Velnar thought, there was hope after all. Commander Sarah Chen floated through the torn hull of the Harmonious Discovery and took a moment to appreciate the damage. The asteroid had really done a number on this ship. Metal twisted like paper, systems sparking in the vacuum, and radiation readings that would have her medical officer giving stern lectures about her dosimeter badge later. Nothing she hadn't seen before on mining accidents, though. This was fixable. "Marcus, you seeing this reactor configuration?" she asked over the team channel. Her chief engineer's voice crackled back. "Yeah, boss. It's pretty, but it's not efficient. These coalition folks really over-engineered everything. Also, I think their radiation shielding is made of something that actually makes the radiation worse." Sarah would have laughed, but her suit mic would pick it up and probably terrify their hosts even more. The captain, Velnar, according to the manifest, had sounded on the edge of panic during their communications. She'd worked enough rescues to recognize the sound of someone who'd never faced real danger before and didn't know how to process it. "All right, team," she said, pulling herself along a twisted support beam toward the reactor section. "These people are scared. Let's get them stable and try not to do anything that'll give them heart attacks. If they have hearts." "No promises," Marcus replied. "I might need to do some welding in hard vacuum. Just try to warn them first." Sarah's team consisted of 5 people, which was about standard for mining operations that might turn into rescue work. Besides Marcus on engineering, she had Dr. James Reeves for medical, Liu and Kowalski for general repairs, and young Tyler Chen, no relation, who was still in training but showed promise. All of them were used to working in conditions that made safety inspectors nervous. They reached the reactor room and Sarah felt her eyebrows rise. The reactor itself was beautiful, she had to admit. Crystalline structures that pulsed with contained energy, elegant curves, and a design that looked more like art than engineering. It also had a crack running through the primary containment field that was leaking exotic particles at a rate that would kill most species in about 3 minutes. "Okay, that's actually bad," Sarah admitted. "Marcus, can we patch it?" Marcus drifted closer, his suit sensors scanning the damage. "Maybe. Their technology is way different from ours, but energy containment is energy containment. I can jury-rig something with our emergency sealant and some creative thinking. It won't be pretty, and it definitely won't be up to their safety codes, but it'll hold long enough to get them to a repair station." "Do it. Liu, Kowalski, start on the hull breaches. Priority is life support sections. Dr. Reeves, find their medical bay and see if any of their people need help. Tyler, you're with me. We're going to talk to the captain and try to keep him from having a breakdown." The team split up with practiced efficiency. Sarah pulled herself through the damaged corridors toward the bridge, with Tyler following close behind. She noted the ship's design as they moved: wide corridors, gentle lighting, and absolutely no emergency handholds or secure points. This ship had been designed for a species that never expected things to go wrong. "Commander Chen," Tyler said quietly, "is it true that most alien species don't have emergencies on their worlds?" "That's what the orientation material said," Sarah replied. "Most coalition species evolved on stable planets. No earthquakes, no hurricanes, no predators. They didn't need to develop fast stress responses because their environments didn't have sudden dangers." "That sounds nice." "It sounds boring," Sarah corrected. "But yeah, probably nice too." They reached the bridge and Sarah's suit system interfaced with the door controls. The door opened and she got her first real look at an alien bridge crew. About a dozen beings in various shapes and sizes, all staring at her with expressions she couldn't quite read but assumed were fear. The captain was obvious, a being made of some kind of crystalline material that refracted light in beautiful patterns. He stood or possibly floated near the center of the bridge, his body language radiating stress even though Sarah had no idea how to read crystalline body language. "Captain Velnar," Sarah said, keeping her voice calm and professional. "Commander Sarah Chen, my team is working on your reactor and hull breaches. We should have you stabilized within a few hours." Velnar's body flickered through several colors before settling on a pale blue. "Commander Chen, thank you for responding to our distress call. I must confess we are not accustomed to situations like this. My crew is frightened." Sarah could see that. One of the insect-like beings was trembling so hard his antennae were blurring. Another alien, this one made of gas contained in some kind of suit, seemed to be having trouble maintaining cohesion. "That's completely understandable," Sarah said gently. "Sudden emergencies are scary, especially if you're not used to them. But my team has handled situations like this before. We'll get you through it." You've handled situations like this before? Velnar repeated, his tone suggesting disbelief. Our ship is in critical failure. We have lethal radiation leaks and hull breaches exposing us to vacuum. Your species considers this routine? Sarah realized her mistake. To her team, this was routine. Mining accidents happened. Equipment failed. People adapted and fixed it. But to beings from stable worlds, this must seem like an apocalypse. We're from Earth, Sarah said, as if that explained everything. And maybe it did. Our world throws disasters at us pretty regularly. We've learned to deal with them. Captain, I promise you, we will get your people to safety. Before Velnar could respond, Marcus's voice came over the team channel. Boss, we've got a problem. Sarah's stomach tightened. What kind of problem? The kind where I need to do external repairs on the reactor housing, while the ship is still generating thrust to maintain orbit around that gas giant. I'll need to be outside the hull. How dangerous are we talking? For them? Instantly fatal. For me? I'll need someone to hold my tether, and I'd really prefer not to fall into a gas giant today. Sarah switched back to speaking with Velnar. Captain, my engineer needs to do some external repairs. It's going to look dangerous, but I assure you he knows what he's doing. Velnar's color shifted to something darker. External repairs? While we're in motion? Commander. The radiation levels and the magnetic fields from the gas giant will be fatal. Even your species cannot survive that. We'll manage, Sarah said. Marcus, you're clear for external work. Tyler, go with him and handle the tether. Do not fall into the gas giant. Yes, ma'am. Tyler replied with a cheerfulness that probably wasn't reassuring to the alien crew. Sarah pulled up the external camera feeds on her suit, display, and watched as Marcus and Tyler exited through one of the hull breaches. They moved with the confidence of people who had done this kind of work dozens of times, which they had. Marcus positioned himself against the damaged reactor housing and began working while Tyler anchored the safety tether to a support beam. The bridge crew watched on their view screens, in what Sarah was pretty sure was horror. Marcus was essentially welding a cracked reactor containment system while hanging off the side of a moving ship in hard vacuum with a gas giant's magnetic field washing over him. He worked steadily, his movements precise and efficient. How is he doing that? Whispered one of the aliens, the insect one. The radiation should be cooking him inside his suit. His suit has pretty good shielding, Sarah said. And humans can handle more radiation than most species. We actually evolved some resistance because our sun throws off a lot of radiation. Marcus will be fine for a couple hours of work. Hours? Velnar's voice nearly cracked. He's planning to work in those conditions for hours? However long it takes, Sarah said simply. Captain, I know this all seems extreme to you, but this is what we do. We work in dangerous places because that's what Earth taught us to do. We fix things that are broken. We help people who need it, and we don't give up just because conditions are bad. She watched the bridge crew process that. They looked at her like she was something from a nightmare, but also like she was something miraculous. People from a world so terrible it had forged them into beings who could work in conditions that would kill anyone else. Your world made you into this, Velnar said quietly. Earth made you capable of enduring the unendurable. Earth made us into survivors, Sarah agreed. But we chose to be helpers. There's a difference. We could have used our abilities for conquest or destruction. Instead, we built societies based on cooperation, and we help people when they send out distress calls. That's the important part, Captain. Not what we can endure, but what we choose to do with that ability. Over the next 3 hours, Sarah's team worked through the harmonious discovery like a force of nature. Marcus completed his external repairs, replacing sections of the reactor housing with human materials that weren't as elegant, but would hold. Liu and Kowalski sealed the hull breaches with industrial adhesive and metal patches. Dr. Reeves treated 3 injured crew members, figuring out alien physiology on the fly with a combination of medical scanners and educated guesses. Through it all, Sarah stayed on the bridge answering questions and trying to help the alien crew understand that they were going to be okay. She watched their fear slowly transform into something else. Not quite trust, but maybe the beginning of it. Finally, Marcus's voice came over the channel. Boss, reactor is stabilized. Engineer Thisik stood in the docking tube, connecting the harmonious discovery to the human vessel, and tried to control his trembling antennae. Around him, the other survivors of his crew moved slowly toward the Perseverance, their various forms of body language all expressing the same emotion: dread. It will be fine, Captain Velnar said from behind him, though his crystalline body pulsed with colors that suggested he didn't believe his own words. The humans have been nothing but helpful. The humans are terrifying, whispered Numa, her gaseous form swirling with agitation inside her containment suit. Did you see how they worked? They welded in hard vacuum. They walked through radiation that should have killed them. They picked up debris with their bare hands that weighed more than some of our crew members. Thisik couldn't argue. He'd watched the human engineer called Marcus perform repairs that should have been impossible, working in an environment that registered as certain death on every scanner. The human had hummed while doing it. His translator had picked up the sound. Marcus had been humming a melody while repairing a cracked reactor in lethal radiation. The docking tube opened, and Thisik got his first look at the interior of a human ship. His antennae immediately drooped. The corridor was lit with harsh white light that hurt his eyes. The walls were bare metal with pipes and conduits exposed instead of hidden behind proper paneling. Warning signs in human script covered nearly every surface. Though his translator helpfully informed him, they said things like high voltage and rotating, machinery, and authorized personnel only. What kind of species needed? That many warning signs on a civilian vessel? Commander Chen stood at the entrance, her face showing what Thisik's cultural database suggested was a smile. A gesture meant to indicate friendliness, though it displayed her teeth in a way that reminded him of Earth's predator species. She'd removed her helmet, and Thisik could see that humans had forward-facing eyes like hunters, hair growing from their heads, and skin that looked surprisingly soft for beings from a Deathworld. "Welcome aboard the Perseverance," Chen said cheerfully. "We've set up quarters for everyone in sections C and D. We've adjusted the gravity down to 0.4 G and modified the atmosphere to match your ship's specifications as closely as we could. It's not perfect, but it should be comfortable enough for the journey." 0.4 G. Thisik did the calculation and felt his antennae droop further. That was still twice the gravity of his homeworld. The humans considered that adjusted down, which meant their normal gravity was more than 4 times what he was used to. The crew filed into the Perseverance, and Thisik immediately felt the crushing weight of the increased gravity. His legs ached and his breathing came harder. Around him, other crew members struggled similarly. The Velskari moved slowly, their crystalline structures stressed by the weight. The Chitresh folded their limbs carefully, trying to distribute the load. "I know the gravity is higher than you're used to," Chen said sympathetically. "We've set up mobility aids in your quarters, basically small anti-grav platforms you can stand on. That should help. Follow me and I'll show you to your sections." She set off down the corridor at what was probably a slow walk for her species, but was nearly a jog for Thisik's tired legs. He struggled to keep up, noting details of the human ship as they moved. Everything was built thick and heavy. Doors looked like they could survive explosive decompression. Floors had textured surfaces for grip. Handholds lined every corridor, as if humans expected to need to grab onto something at any moment. They passed a room with a window, and Thisik made the mistake of looking inside. He froze, his antennae standing straight up in shock. Inside were several humans engaged in what his translator called exercise. They were deliberately lifting heavy objects, running on machines that went nowhere, and pulling themselves up using bars mounted to the walls. One human was lying on her back pushing a bar loaded with metal plates. His scanner estimated the weight at over 100 kilograms, straight up into the air, then lowering it to her chest, then pushing it up again, repeatedly, by choice. "That's our gym," Chen said, noticing his stare. "Crew needs to stay in shape on long missions. 0G causes muscle atrophy if you're not careful." "They're hurting themselves," Thisik whispered. "On purpose." Chen's face showed confusion. "No, they're exercising. It's healthy. Builds strength and cardiovascular fitness." "Do your species not exercise?" "Our species do not need to deliberately stress our bodies to maintain health," Captain Velnar said carefully. "Our worlds do not require such extremes." Something crossed Chen's face, an expression Thisik's database labeled as surprise. "Huh. I guess if you're from a low-gravity world with no predators, you wouldn't need to maintain the ability to run or fight or lift things. That must be nice. Come on, let me show you the quarters." The living sections were better. The gravity was still crushing and the lighting was still harsh, but the humans had clearly tried to make things comfortable. Each species had been assigned rooms with adjustable atmospheres and temperature controls. Small platforms with anti-gravity generators floated near each door. These should help with the gravity, Chen explained, gesturing to one of the platforms. Step on and it'll reduce your effective weight to whatever feels comfortable. They're good for about 8 hours on a charge. We've also set up a common area with lower gravity, if you want to gather together. The mess hall serves human food, but we've synthesized some basic nutrients that should work for most of your species based on your ship's database. Dr. Reeves is still working on getting the exact mixtures right. She paused, her expression becoming more serious. I know this is all strange and uncomfortable for you. We're going to do our best to make the journey as easy as possible. The trip to Coalition Station Meridian 7 will take about 5 days. If you need anything, there's a comm panel in each room. Just call and someone will help. Any questions? Thisik had about 1,000 questions, but his mouth was too dry to ask any of them. The other crew members looked similarly overwhelmed. We appreciate your hospitality, Commander, Velnar said formally. We will adapt as best we can. Chen nodded and left, her footsteps heavy in the corridor. The crew dispersed to their assigned quarters, moving slowly in the oppressive gravity. Thisik entered his room and collapsed onto one of the floating platforms with relief, as the anti-grav field reduced his weight. His legs still ached, but at least he could breathe normally again. Over the next day, Thisik and the other survivors began to explore their temporary home and discovered new surprises at every turn. The mess hall became a source of particular fascination and horror. The humans prepared food using something called cooking, the deliberate application of heat and chemical reactions to raw ingredients. Thisik watched in disbelief as one of the human crew members put vegetables and what his scanner identified as animal tissue into a pan with combustible oil and placed it directly over a flame. The food sizzled and browned, filling the air with smells that were simultaneously appealing and disturbing. You burn your food? He asked the cook, a human woman named Rodriguez. We cook it, she corrected cheerfully. Heat breaks down the proteins and makes things more digestible. Also, it tastes better. Want to try some? Thisic's scanner informed him that the food contained compounds that would be mildly toxic to his species. He politely declined. The common area proved to be another source of cultural shock. The humans had decorated it with what they called houseplants, living vegetation from Earth that they kept in containers for aesthetic purposes. Thisic's botanical scanner went into alarm mode when it identified the species. One plant had leaves that contained cardiac glycosides. Another had sap that could cause chemical burns. A third had modified leaves that could trap and digest small insects. Why do you keep dangerous plants in your living space? He asked Chen when she stopped by to check on them. Chen looked at the plants with obvious fondness. Dangerous? Oh, you mean the oleander and the Venus flytrap? They're not dangerous if you don't eat them. They're pretty and they help process the air. Plants are nice to have around. They're alive and growing. Makes the ship feel less sterile. The concept of keeping toxic organisms around for decoration made Thisic's antennae hurt. But the most disturbing discovery came when Numa asked Dr. Reeves for something to help with her anxiety. The doctor, a kind-faced human male, offered her a beverage he called chamomile tea. It's very gentle, Reeves explained. We use it to help people relax. It has mild sedative properties. Numa's scanner analyzed the beverage and her gaseous form turned a pale color of shock. This contains compounds that affect neural function. This is a drug. Well, technically yes, Reeves admitted, but it's very mild. Humans drink it all the time. Oh wait, is your species more sensitive to these compounds? Let me check. He ran some tests and confirmed that what humans considered a gentle, relaxing tea would put Numa into a coma. He apologized profusely and offered to synthesize something safer. But the damage to the crew's collective psyche was done. The humans casually consumed neurotoxins for relaxation. Despite all the strangeness and discomfort, Thisik began to notice something else. The humans were genuinely trying to help. Captain Kresh of the pirate vessel, Bloodfang, watched the human ship through his viewscreen and felt his predatory instinct sharpen with anticipation. His species, the Kreshtar, came from a world of scarcity and violence. They had evolved as hunters and had brought those instincts to the stars. The Galactic Coalition called them pirates and criminals. Kresh preferred to think of them as entrepreneurs who understood that strength determined ownership. The approaching vessel was a mining ship, basically a cargo hauler with industrial equipment. Easy prey. The fact that it was crewed by humans barely registered as a concern. Kresh had heard rumors about the newcomers from the Deathworld called Earth, but rumors were just stories. Every species thought they were tough until they met the Kreshtar. Target their engines, Kresh ordered his weapons officer. A warning shot. Let them know we're serious. A beam of energy lanced across space and struck the Perseverance's aft shield. The shield flickered but held, standard mining ship defenses barely worth the name. They should be surrendering now, Kresh said confidently. Any species with sense knows not to fight when they're outgunned. But the human ship didn't surrender. Instead, it turned to face them directly, and Kresh felt his first hint of unease. That was an aggressive stance, not a defensive one. Mining ships didn't face their attackers, they ran or surrendered. Captain, they're powering up their equipment, his sensor officer reported, reading energy signatures from multiple systems. I'm not sure what they're doing. They're preparing to fight, Kresh said with disbelief. A mining ship with 5 crew members is preparing to fight us. The humans must be insane. The human commander's voice came over the open channel again. Last warning, pirate ship. We have 47 refugees aboard who've already survived one disaster. We're not going to let you hurt them. Stand down and we can all walk away from this. Keep pushing and you'll regret it. Kresh laughed, a harsh barking sound. Human, you have no weapons. We have enough firepower to tear your ship apart. You should be begging for mercy. We don't beg, the human replied, and something in her tone made Kresh's combat instincts twitch with warning. And we don't need weapons. We're a mining ship. We crack asteroids for a living. Before Kresh could process what that meant, the Perseverance fired. But they didn't fire weapons, they fired their mining equipment. Industrial cutting lasers designed to slice through solid rock lanced out with terrifying precision, targeting the Bloodfang's weapon emplacements. One of his forward guns exploded in a shower of debris. Evasive maneuvers, Kresh shouted. Return fire. His crew responded, but the human ship moved with unexpected agility for its size. It dodged his weapons fire and launched something from its cargo bay. Mining charges, explosive packages designed to break apart asteroids. They detonated against his shields with force that made his ship shudder. Those are mining explosives, his sensor officer shouted. They're using industrial equipment as weapons. Then use our weapons to destroy them, Kresh roared back. But the humans fought like nothing Kresh had encountered before. They used every piece of equipment on their ship as a weapon. Magnetic grapples designed for moving ore latched onto his hull and pulled at his armor plating. Drilling lasers burned through his shields. More mining charges detonated in precisely calculated patterns that overwhelmed his defensive systems. The humans fought like beings who had learned combat from a world that was constantly trying to kill them. They were aggressive, creative, and absolutely ruthless in their efficiency. Captain, our shields are failing, his engineer reported. They're targeting our weak points with surgical precision. They know our ship design better than we do. Kresh felt something unfamiliar creep into his chest. Fear. He'd fought dozens of battles and always won through superior aggression. But the humans were more aggressive. They came from a world that made the Kreshtar homeworld look gentle, and they'd learned lessons his species had never needed to face. They're launching a boarding pod, his security officer screamed. Kresh's blood ran cold. What, they're boarding us? The pod, actually a mining shuttle modified with cutting equipment, latched onto his hull with magnetic clamps. Cutting lasers began burning through his armor like it was paper. His security teams rushed to the breach point with weapons ready, prepared to repel boarders. Then the hull gave way and humans in actual combat gear came through the opening, and Kresh understood true terror. The humans moved through his ship like demons. They were encased in powered armor that made them faster and stronger than any Kreshtar. They carried weapons that fired projectiles with devastating force. But worse than their equipment was their attitude. They advanced through his ship's corridors with calm, professional efficiency, like they'd done this 100 times before. His security teams tried to fight back. The Kreshtar were warriors, predators who knew violence. But the humans had something his species lacked. They'd evolved fighting against an entire planet's worth of things trying to kill them. They didn't just know how to fight. They knew how to survive against impossible odds. One of his security officers fired at a human soldier and hit her directly in the chest.
The impact should have killed her.
Instead, she stumbled backward, looked down at the scorch mark on her armor, and then looked back up at the Kreshtar who'd shot her. Through her helmet's visor, Kresh could see her eyes, cold, calculating, and absolutely furious. That was a mistake, the human said calmly. And then she moved. She covered the distance to his security officer in seconds, moving with a speed that shouldn't have been possible in full armor. She struck him with the butt of her weapon, and he went down hard. She didn't kill him. She rendered him unconscious with precise, controlled force. All around the corridor, other humans were doing the same thing, taking down his crew with practiced efficiency. They weren't killing. They were neutralizing threats with minimum necessary force. That somehow made them more terrifying than if they'd simply slaughtered everyone. Surrender. Kresh shouted over the internal comms. All crew stand down! Surrender to the humans. His crew stopped fighting immediately, dropping weapons and raising their hands or paws or claws depending on the individual. They'd been beaten in less than 10 minutes by a boarding party of 3 humans who'd treated his heavily armed ship like it was a minor inconvenience. The lead human, a woman whose armor identified her as Chen, approached Kresh directly. Even through her helmet, he could see her evaluating him with those forward-facing predator eyes. Captain Kresh, she said, you and your crew are now prisoners. You'll be held in secure quarters and handed over to coalition authorities when we reach the station. You'll be provided with food, water, and medical care for any injuries. You will not be harmed unless you try to escape or hurt my crew or passengers. Do you understand? Kresh understood. He understood that he'd attacked the wrong ship, that he'd picked a fight with a species that made his own look weak, and that the humans could have killed his entire crew but chose mercy instead. That last part confused him more than anything else. Why? He asked. Why didn't you kill us? We attacked you. We threatened your passengers. You had every right to destroy us. Chen's expression was visible now as she removed her helmet. Her face showed something that Kresh's translator identified as sadness mixed with determination. Because we know what desperation looks like, she said quietly. We come from a world that tried to kill us every single day. We know what it means to fight for survival, to do terrible things because you think you have no choice. We've been desperate and dangerous. But we also learned that mercy and compassion aren't weaknesses. They're what separate people from monsters. We became strong enough to survive anything, which means we're strong enough to choose kindness even when we don't have to. She paused, looking around at his defeated crew. You made a bad choice today. You'll face consequences for that. But we're not going to become the things we learned to fight against just because we have the power to do it. Kresh felt something shift in his understanding of the universe. His species believed that strength determined everything, that the powerful took what they wanted and the weak suffered. But these humans, beings from a world more terrible than anything the Kreshtar had ever faced, had become strong enough to choose differently. They had all the tools to be perfect predators, perfect conquerors, and they chose mercy instead. Back on the Perseverance, Thisik watched through the camera feeds as the human boarding party returned with prisoners. The pirates were being escorted to the cargo bay, which had been converted into a temporary holding area. Dr. Reeves was already there with his medical kit, checking the prisoners for injuries. I don't understand, Thisik said to Captain Velnar, who was watching the same feeds from the common area. The humans defeated them completely. The pirates attacked us, threatened to kill us. Why are the humans treating them so gently now? Velnar's crystalline structure pulsed with thoughtful colors. I think, he said slowly, that we're witnessing something unique. The humans have been shaped by impossible conditions. Their world taught them to be survivors, fighters, beings capable of incredible violence. But somewhere in their evolution, they also learned cooperation, empathy, and mercy. They became strong enough to have choices about how to use their strength. Coalition Station Meridian 7 was a marvel of galactic engineering. Crystalline spires reached into space while docking bays hummed with vessels from 100 worlds. Council chambers gleamed with the collected wisdom of civilizations that had known peace for millennia. It was a symbol of everything the Galactic Coalition represented: stability, cooperation, and the triumph of civilization over chaos. Captain Velnar stood at the viewing port of the Perseverance as the station grew larger ahead of them, and felt his crystalline structure pulse with conflicting emotions. Relief that they would soon be home, anxiety about what came next, and something else, a strange reluctance to leave the human ship despite how uncomfortable it had been. First time back to civilization in a while? Commander Chen asked, coming to stand beside him. She had to crouch slightly to look out the viewport at a comfortable angle, another reminder of how differently their species experienced the universe. First time I've been away from it long enough to see it from the outside. Velnar admitted. Commander, may I ask you something? Sure. Are all humans like you and your crew? Chen laughed, a sound Velnar had learned to recognize as genuine amusement rather than threat display. No, not all of us. We've got about 9 billion people on Earth, and we're pretty diverse. Some of us are brave, some are cowards. Some are kind, some are cruel. Some are brilliant, some are idiots. We're people, with all the variation that implies. But you answered our distress call, Velnar pressed. You risked your lives for strangers. You showed mercy to pirates who tried to kill you. Is that common among humans? Chen considered the question seriously. More common than you might think. Yet humans can be selfish and terrible, but we're also capable of incredible kindness. We have this concept called empathy, the ability to understand what others are feeling. Our harsh world taught us to work together, to help each other because alone we couldn't survive. That's built into our culture now. When someone calls for help, we answer. When someone needs mercy, we try to give it. It's not universal, but it's something most humans value. The Coalition has been hesitant to accept humanity as members, Velnar said carefully. Many species fear you because of your capabilities and your violent history. I confess before this journey I shared those fears. And now? Velnar turned his body to face her directly, his structure glowing with warm colors that indicated respect and trust. Now I believe the Coalition would be fools to keep humanity at a distance. We need what you have, not your strength or your resilience, though those are formidable. We need your perspective, your willingness to face impossible situations and find solutions, your ability to show mercy, even when you've earned the right to revenge. The galaxy is larger and more dangerous than we've wanted to admit. Having friends who can handle that danger would be wise. The docking procedure took another hour. Station authorities had been notified of their arrival and the circumstances that had brought them there. By the time the Perseverance sealed into its docking cradle, a delegation was waiting to greet them. Thisik emerged from the docking tube onto the familiar gravity of the station and felt his antennae relax with relief. Normal gravity, gentle lighting. Filtered air that didn't carry the harsh metallic taste of a human ship. It felt like coming home after a nightmare, except it didn't quite feel like home anymore. Something had changed during those 5 days aboard the Perseverance. He'd seen things that had shaken his understanding of the universe. The delegation included medical personnel, station administrators, and several members of the Coalition Council's Xenodiplomacy Division. They swept the refugees away for examinations and debriefings, while Commander Chen and her crew handled the formal transfer of the captured pirates to Coalition security. The debriefings lasted for hours. Thisik sat in a comfortable chair in a comfortable room and told his story to a succession of officials who recorded everything with careful attention. He described the asteroid impact, the desperate distress call, the arrival of the humans. He described watching them work in conditions that should have killed them, repair systems with improvised solutions that somehow worked, and treat injuries with medicine they'd adapted on the fly. He described the journey aboard their ship, the crushing gravity, the toxic plants, the casual consumption of neurotoxins, the deliberate physical stress they called exercise. He described the pirate attack and how the humans had fought with mining equipment and won. How they'd boarded the enemy vessel and captured the pirates instead of killing them. Most of all, he described Commander Chen and her crew, their competence, their kindness, their remarkable combination of capability and compassion. They're not what we expected, Thisik concluded. We thought beings from a Deathworld would be brutal and aggressive, and they can be when necessary. But they're also capable of incredible gentleness. They choose mercy when they could choose violence. They help strangers when they could ignore them. They're the most dangerous beings I've ever met, and also the most caring. The debriefer, a Velskari official named Torvin, pulsed with thoughtful colors. Your testimony aligns with the others. Every member of your crew has expressed similar observations. This is significant. The Council has been debating humanity's status for months. This incident may force a decision. The debate came sooner than anyone expected. Within 2 days of the Harmonious Discovery crew's arrival, the Coalition Council called an emergency session. The topic, humanity's application for full membership in the Galactic Coalition. Velnar was summoned to testify, along with several other members of his crew. The council chambers were vast and impressive, with seats arranged in concentric circles around a central speaking platform. Representatives from hundreds of worlds filled those seats, crystalline beings, gaseous entities, insectoid forms, and dozens of other configurations of life. At the center of the debate was a faction called the Collective of Settled Worlds. Their spokesman, a being named Kelvar from a species called the Torishan, stood on the platform and made the case against humanity with passionate conviction. The humans are too dangerous, Kelvar argued, his forearms gesturing emphatically. Yes, they saved the crew of the Harmonious Discovery. Yes, they showed mercy to pirates, but consider what they revealed in doing so. They operate comfortably in environments that would kill most coalition species. They repurposed civilian mining equipment into weapons with terrifying ease. They boarded and captured a pirate vessel crewed by Kreshtar warriors, beings from a mid-level Deathworld, in less than 10 minutes. He paused, letting that sink in. The humans are physically stronger, more resilient, and more comfortable with violence than any species we've ever encountered. They come from a world so terrible that our databases initially classified it as uninhabitable, and yet they survived. They thrived. They reached the stars. What happens when beings like that are given access to our technology, our knowledge, our resources? What's to stop them from conquering us all? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Fear was a powerful motivator, and many species had never encountered anything they needed to fear before joining the coalition. Then Velnar was called to the platform. He stood before the assembled representatives and felt the weight of what he was about to say. His testimony could determine humanity's fate in the galaxy. I was afraid of the humans, Velnar began, his voice steady. When they responded to our distress call, I was terrified. I had read about Earth, about the constant disasters and predation and violence. I thought beings from such a world would be monsters. I was wrong. He looked around at the assembled representatives. Yes, the humans are capable of incredible things. They can work in environments that would kill us. They can adapt and improvise in ways we've never needed to learn. They can fight with an efficiency that comes from millions of years of evolution on a world that was actively hostile to life. But do you know what else they learned on that world? The chamber was silent now. Every representative focused on his words. They learned cooperation, Velnar continued. They learned empathy. They learned that the only way to survive impossible conditions was to help each other. Their harsh world didn't make them into brutal individualists. It made them into beings who understood the value of community, of compassion, of working together toward common goals. He paused, organizing his thoughts. Commander Chen told me something during our journey. She said that humans didn't survive by becoming more brutal than their environment. They survived by becoming better than it, by choosing kindness and cooperation even when violence would have been easier, by building civilizations based on hope instead of fear. The humans answered our distress call knowing it was dangerous. They risked their lives for strangers. When they encountered pirates, they tried diplomacy first. When they had to fight, they used precise force and showed mercy to defeated enemies. They had every right to kill those pirates. The pirates had tried to kill us all. But the humans captured them instead, treated their injuries, and brought them here to face justice rather than summary execution. Velnar's structure glowed bright with conviction. Counselors, I believe we're asking the wrong question. We shouldn't ask whether humans are too dangerous to join the coalition. We should ask whether we can afford to keep them at a distance.